And a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're connected. Diana, how you doing? Are you hiding from the coronavirus today? Are you hiding up in Ohio today?
Well, we are protected, and we are being very wise in the way that we approach everyone. And so we've got a great governor who's given us good guidance. Everything's good.
Oh, see, you're so different than us here in Florida because it's the complete opposite. I go to a restaurant, I go to a grocery store, nobody is wearing a mask. It's like, get out of my way, everything is fine. And of course, our COVID cases continue to rise. So
yeah. I mean, it's odd. I mean, you go to the store, it's different. You go to a restaurant, it's different, but certainly something that we are trying to be aware of. Ohio has led the, United States. I don't know if you've seen that. Our governor has led the United States in making very proactive moves. Not everybody's been happy, but would you like to be in that seat?
No.
Most of us like to sit in the stands and yell at people for making decisions, but no one would like to be in that decision, to have to make that decision. So
well, we could use some of those theories down here in Florida because it's the complete opposite. It's like the wild, wild west. Hey man, don't tell me what to do. And I'm going to the beach, I'm going out, and I'm not wearing a mask. So
yeah. And so you have it. There are going to be people who are going to just do whatever they want to do. So.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. I want to talk about Rayshard Brooks. I want to begin there. And I want to get your take on it as a woman who is very vocal about these things. It's very honest. You're an attorney. You have a law background. I've watched this videotape real closely. I've gone frame by frame. My question to you as a woman, as an African-American woman, you watch this, and as an attorney, do you look at this and go, are they going to really be able to convict these officers of this brutal assault on this man?
Well, are you asking me what my take is, or are they going to be able to convict him?
Both,
okay.
Yeah.
So as a person who has looked at this video several times as well, it's sad that did it have to go that far? Okay. As an individual who looks at these cases from my perspective, the conversation that ensued between the officer and Rayshard was a very civil conversation, was something that any reasonable person would wonder, why did he end up in handcuffs? Couldn't there have been, police officers have leeway, right? They have opportunities to say, you know what? We could probably let you go. We'll let you walk home. We'll let you do this, because we have the discretion to do that as police officers. So what's got to come into play is, why did it have to go to the next level? Now that it went to the next level, did Rayshard make a positive choice? No. That's not something that should have happened. Should it have resulted in him being killed? No. Why? So there's reform that needs to happen there. Now, what was your last question?
Well, as an attorney, so to put on your attorney hat, counselor, what would you say? Are they going to be able to look at this and go, look, here's what he did. He grabbed the taser, he ran off, and they did what they should do by the book?
Yeah. Well, there's certainly that. In light of everything that is going on, we're going to have to look at all of those steps, and that is all going to have to be taken into consideration. Should there be some punishment? Absolutely. Should there degree of punishment, right? Because we always have to look at there is a degree of punishment that needs to be ensued. So in light of what's going on in our country today, in light of the fact that we do need reform, we do need some shifting of policies, practices, that's all has to be taken into consideration. So my answer to that is, it depends, which is what I say frequently when I don't have an answer to it. But I certainly know that, when I look at it in its entirety, when I look at this video in its entirety, it makes me upset that he even found himself in handcuffs. Because I don't know, have you ever had an opportunity where you may have had a drink or two, and have you ever found yourself just sleeping in a parking lot? That you would be, granted he was in the way of people driving, but I, as an advocate, I don't just look at that one. I look at it in its entirety, and I see, and there's a picture, there's a story there that can be shared. And so people need to look at it in its entirety, because that's what you do. As a police officer, you're supposed to be, and I don't know all of the guidelines, tactics, policies, practices. I just know that we have to look at that. Now, he's running away. He has taken the taser. Of course, that's not a great thing to do. That's something that's not a wise choice. So there you go.
No, I've been saying this from the beginning. This whole discussion between George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks and everyone else in between is all about police protocol.
Yeah.
And I have argued with people about this. We're focusing on the wrong things a lot of times. What I think needs to be done, you correct me if I'm wrong, but there needs to be a universal protocol, hear me out, that when I'm pulled over, you're pulled over, these are the steps that we all do. And we all need to understand them. They should be in PSAs. They should be commercials about this. We should all be on the same page. I don't care if you live in Beverly Hills or you live in Ohio. These are the steps when a police officer pulls you over. This is what you do. And I'm not smart enough to put all that together, but you put your hands on the steering wheel. This is what you do, and you follow these steps. And it needs to be the same in every state, so there's no misunderstanding of this, because I think that's the problem. And then what happens is everybody's protocol is different, and everyone has leeway to do this, to do that, and then nobody knows what to do, and then chaos ensues.
Randy, I think that's a great thought, but we've got deeper issues than just protocol. We've got bias. We've got that internal methodology that goes on in an individual's head when they are approaching people. And that's where the issue of race comes in. That has historically been the case in this country on that issue. So even if you did have those guidelines, we can't dismiss the fact that we've got some individuals who have issues with people of different, that are Black men specifically, and Black lives. Have you ever had a talk with do you have children?
I have children, yes.
Okay. Do you have boys?
Yep, one.
Have you had a talk with them about how because I'm going to just tell you something. Everything that you just said is exactly what likely a Black father or a Black mother has said to their Black sons or their Black children. I had the talk. So everything you're saying, we got that. We're down with that. Okay. But we're not treated the same way. You see, that's where the problem is.
Well, okay, then let's go back to the Rayshard Brooks case. I think if there was standard protocol that you, as the person that's being questioned off by the police officer, and what the police officer is going to do, if there was a step-by-step procedure that we all had to follow, and then when that gets broken, what do we do? Like in the case of this, because it's a good example, we all know about it, we've all seen the video. Tell me what the police officer should have done. Like, walk through it with me, like what they should have done differently when they thought he maybe was driving drunk, or obviously he drove his car there drunk. What should they do? Should they drive him home? Tell me what the solution is in that case.
Yeah, so let's take a reasonable person standpoint, okay? What would a reasonable person do? Reason means that you're taking into consideration the fact that this is a human being. I need to be able to have some empathy, grace here. You know, hey, I see that you were sleeping here. Person says, hey, I can walk home or I can drive you home. It would likely meet, why wouldn't you? As a peace officer, because I thought we're supposed to protect and serve. So the service element comes in Let me see how I can help. This person's being very reasonable. He's taking time to have a conversation with me, having a dialogue with me. Let me try to protect and serve in this particular case. And if he says, he just lives right down the road, why not? Here, man, pull your car over here, put it in the parking lot. We'll drive you home. You can get the keys go drive your car the next day, sleep it off. Done. Why are we here, Andy? We are here because we've got issues in this country that we need to take serious look at. And thank you for the protocol. Thank you for that ideology. But we have got to dig deeper.
Okay.
We've got to look at this in a different way. This is my work, right? I do a lot of implicit bias training. Right? Every governor in the country, our governor of Ohio even talked about this, implicit bias training. And then we also have to look at, there's some things policy-wise that we need to reform, right? We need to, when police, like for example, there were some wonderful, wonderful advocates in our community who worked on a piece of legislation. It's called the right to know. And so when a police officer comes up to you, we want to know who you are. We need a card. We need information. Right? We also have these like no knock things where you have to knock, for the Breonna Taylor type of issue. So when we look at these cases, we can see little nuances of things that need to change in the policies and procedures of police officers, as you mentioned, right? Because you're actually, saying that we had to have a different procedure. But then we also have to look at the mental constructs of people and how we approach our emotions, because emotions override any legal situation.
Right. Well, you're agreeing with me that there needs to be different protocols. So then you absolutely. And I are on the same page, because then we're saying anytime we find somebody in a car, white, black, Chinese, Indian, we drive them home. Is that what we're in agreement with? Well,
in that particular situation, one reasonable person would agree that would be a logical result.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, can we get on? In other words, if the protocol, the rules aren't clear, it's kind of like what mood the officer's feeling at that moment.
Yes.
And that's where we're running in. And this is why I'm saying, if there was you know about the Miranda rights, obviously you do.
Yes.
There's a reason we do that. I know they don't always get read, and a lot of times in court, the case is thrown out because the person didn't get those rights.
Right.
This is what I'm talking about. There has to be a standard that everyone has to follow. It doesn't matter if it's a woman or it's a man. This is what happens. And I'm going to tell you what, there's going to be a lot of white folk that aren't going to like the idea that they got to put their hands on the steering wheel when they get pulled over for a speeding ticket. But that's the rule, and that's what we're all going to follow. So I think you and I are actually on the same page, but this is the other part of this case.
Well, we don't know 100%, but on that particular issue,
okay.
Randy,
all right, that's fine. Stay with me. This is the one that nobody seems to answer, and I get bothered by it. What do we do when the guy grabs a taser or didn't even grab a taser, runs from the officer? What do you want the police to do in Ohio when that guy pushes the officer away and he runs away? What do you do? You're the police.
So I guess I'll answer the question with a question. Should I kill him?
No.
Okay.
No.
So I really, this is the problem, right? Is that, I have not been a police officer. I don't know about that. I have friends that are police officers and have been in the force for quite some time, and they've been trained a certain way, right? And I believe that
protocol,
that training of is it to shoot to kill, or do you need to maybe stop the assailant? I feel like that's where we have to look at that. So in that particular situation, it was a taser.
Right.
So is that lethal force? So I feel like those particular situations, we really need to look at, why are they being killed though? Why is the person in the car who was sitting in the car, why does he need to be killed? Why, these are the situations where, again, if I'm using this reasonable person standard, which is used quite a bit in our legal system, why does that have to happen? And when you check all the boxes, you tend to kind of result in the fact that, oh, what is the common denominator among all of these particular cases is that they're Black men, and in some instances, Black women. But, you know, I really believe that to answer your question, I think there has to be a protocol. Should he have killed them? No. Should he have stopped them somehow? Yes. So, I mean,
well, this is why it goes back to what I started off, why I'm concerned that these police officers will be found not guilty. I think we can go check what the police academy teaches these folks and their protocol, and it's going to say they're in the right to do what they're doing. And that's why I think it needs to be a standard of what we're all on the same page and willing to accept. And if it means that if the person runs away from the officers, do we let them go? Then we all agree we let them go.
Do we attempt to run after them with a taser?
I don't know. Well, I don't know. Yes.
I mean, again, a reasonable person would probably, I mean, he wasn't that far away from them, right? Yeah. Apparently to them, he was drinking. So, you know, maybe you might try to attempt that first. I don't know what the police procedure is try to attempt that first. And this is a person that was sleeping in their car. Did they kill some? I mean, it's like as if this person, was this horrible person killing someone. He was asleep in his car. So what if he does get away? How can we do something, you know, different than that? It's a taser. So I don't know. I just feel like, yes, the procedures are going to say this, that they probably may have followed this. That's why it needs to change.
Right.
That's why we need to change that, you know, because if he had a shotgun or if he had a gun and he's pointing it at him, that's a different situation, obviously.
Right.
And so, you know, we can't deny that. We just cannot deny that. And you, again, as legal counsel and as a very good attorney, you don't just look at that one little piece. You have to look at it in its entirety.
Yeah.
You have to look at a case. You have to build a case. You have to look at how it started, right? Any judge will tell you that. You know, you go into the courtroom, and if they're being belligerent right away, obviously that judge's going to have a different viewpoint on that person. Comes in the case, comes in the courtroom, has decorum, he's talking nicely. The judge is going to, you know, there's that leeway I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So you just can't look at it from that end, because that little if we just had that little piece right here at the end, we would probably say, oh my gosh, he's horrible. Same thing with George Floyd, right? I think that we got to see the whole video, at least all the different angles of George Floyd. Any reasonable person would go, this is outrageous. Obviously, we have the whole world protesting, Randy, about the power that these police officers have to protect and serve and be an ally with their communities, right? And so we cannot deny that as what's going on with police officers. There are some extremely good police officers. I know them. There are some wonderful people out there. But when we do not stand up against these types of issues, then it looks like, you know, we're kind of saying, just excuse them. Just let them go. No, we can't do that. And we're all saying no more.
Yeah.
We're all saying we're done with that. That's not happening anymore.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying. I just think it's not clear cut what the police are going to do and what they should do. And I think it's really confusing to everyone. And I do feel sorry for the police officers, especially in that situation. Somebody grabs your gun. They're trying to
your taser.
It doesn't matter. It's still dangerous. You know, somebody's fighting you. You're a police officer. You don't know what they're going to do. So I do give sympathy to it. I don't believe you shoot a man in the back when they're running. No, I don't. Yeah. Yeah. But their life was threatened. I don't know what this guy's. And by the way, I don't know what he's going to do when he runs into the neighborhood. Does he try to break into some house and hold someone hostage? And then if he kills someone, is there some attorney that's going to sue the police department because you didn't get him in the first place? You know, there's all these possibilities that people forget about. So I just think it all comes down that nobody seems to have a clear cut of what we're supposed to do when someone's pulled over, when someone's arrested. what should we all be doing? And we should all follow the same instructions. I just feel like the police are being taught one thing in the police academy, and then when you're on the street, you're doing something differently, and nobody knows what to do.
Well, we can't deny this. There is a complete and utter lack of trust.
Yes.
Between the police officers and their community.
Yep.
They don't trust. So I don't care what protocol you put out there. If someone doesn't trust you that you're going to do the right thing, then they don't trust you. And so there is something that is a lot to be said for that. So there are so many advocates who are out here saying, we've got to change so many different levels, like the Grassroots Law Project, which these are the attorneys and the law folks who are helping these victims in these cases, and they've put together a plan, which some would say, I don't agree with that. I agree with a lot of what they're advocating. And we have to look at and chunk down all the different elements of police protocol and come together and have those dialogue. We have to have that conversation, and it's going to look completely different.
Yeah.
It's going to look completely different because we've not done anything, right? And I'll say the Black community has for so long talked about police problems. And we haven't had that deep dialogue between the community and the protect and serve to just come to an understanding of what needs to change. Now, I do a lot in the education system. Same thing has to be held there, right? Because we have a lot of guidelines and protocols that are more militant and police and adversarial driven. There's no mediation ways that we can come to reconciliation on issues. Instead, we go right straight to a legal type of resolve. So, like, for example, if a kid's not in school, truancy, they got to go see a truancy officer. You know, that already sets up in their mind that, you know, there's like some legal system that we're already going towards, as opposed to sitting down, going to their house and having conversation and talking about what's going on and getting behind the issue and seeing that whole person. So we're talking about police. I say we got to talk about education. I mean, there's a lot of different. And so what this protesting has really given us an opportunity to take the veil off of our eyes and to finally see things differently. Everyone is going to have an opinion. Everyone is going to have thoughts. But what we have to do is we have to look and listen to the issues of Black lives. We have to listen to that. We're not making this stuff up, right? This has happened over and over and over again. And so we've got to sit down and listen and have dialogue on those things and really appreciate the fact that we can get better. And if the role of the police officers to protect and serve, and when there are issues, right, because we don't want to totally 100% get rid of all the police, we do need to have some time where we're going to have, them to be there. But we have to really look at this from a different lens.
Yeah, I just don't know what that lens is, and I think that's the thing that I'm sort of screaming for is I just want to come up with solutions that everyone can get on the same page, and I think that's what is lacking. But hopefully, all these protests have got to give you hope out there in the sense of think about how this is being done across the world. What George Floyd did. I don't care if you're white, Black, you live in London, you live in India. People are protesting this.
Right. Or what was done to George Floyd, right? Not what George Floyd did, but what was done to him.
What was done to him. And it's got to give you some positive feeling that people, no matter what background or ethnic background, they have come together and said enough is enough. Yeah.
And I feel like we can utilize, the protesting, which I'm happy for, because this is the voice. We need to hear these voices. We need to hear them, and they have every right to protest. I've protested, every right to speak, and to speak this truth. But, again, there are advocates, there are entities like the Grassroots Law Project. And I love seeing organizations, corporations, I've sat in the seat of the diversity inclusion director, and I was what you would call window dressing. No one was taking that as a serious thing. And so finally, we're getting rid of the window dressing, and we're starting to go hard in the paint and realize that we've got to do some big changes for to make Black Lives Matter, but then also to make certain that we are looking at all marginalized groups and seeing that this, I mean, let's just keep this real. I mean, our country was set up for white men, for you, originally, right? Everything was put in place for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Then women came along, and then, of course, now we gave blacks rights, right? Civil rights. And then everything was like, whoa. What do we do now? We got to give them rights. We got to give women rights. Okay, they got to vote. They got to do all. So the country was set up for you to be successful. And we had to fight laws. We had to do wars. We had to have wars, and we had to do a lot of changes. And there's still that bias. So there's still a lot of work to be done. But I know that myself and other advocates are busy trying to kind of come together to, and then also to looking at people, how can we have people be, and as in the words of Ibram Kendi, anti-racist, right? Not just I'm not a racist. So what does that mean? Being very active in calling out things that are not the policies and procedures, and shifting that power so that it's not against people of color or other marginalized groups.
Yeah, no, I think those are excellent points. And I think this is the battle in the United States is, white men who have seen their country change. And I think it just scares the hell out of them. I think they look around and they feel like they don't recognize their country because they've always been able to run it the way they've wanted to run it. And I think that's really the issue here. I think you bring up a really good point.
Absolutely, because that's called power. And I don't want to give up my power. And I've worked hard to gain this power. But we have to recognize you've worked hard to gain this power, and it wasn't a really hard road for you to do that. And now we're looking at the other people where it's if I could just get in, or if I could just do this, or if I could just have this opportunity or this opportunity and not be treated differently because of my skin color, because of my race, because of my gender, because of being out of this country, or because of my disability, or because of my sexual orientation, perhaps I could get to a certain level. So I think all of this plays a role. And yes, it's acknowledging, because when I do my work, the people that are mad that I bring up privilege are usually, white men or white people. I'm tired of hearing that narrative. I'm tired of you bringing that up. Well, it is what it is. And until we accept that as truth and acknowledge that system was set up that way, then we can start to come to some deeper dialogue.
Well, it's weird because, they'll start talking about reverse racism, and you probably get in those discussions with them, and they feel like there's many. Listen, I can tell you this for a fact. There's probably half this country feels like they are the victims of racism, and these are the white people. They feel like they're being cheated. It's bizarre.
Yeah, well, and that's it is what it is, and I just so you know, I grew up like this. I had a white father. I've always been in the intersection of race. So I've always seen it from a lot of different sides. Growing up, though, my father's family disowned us. So I was raised in Black culture. I identify as an African-American woman of mixed race. I'm a Black woman of mixed race. And then, of course, I had a bias against interracial marriages. And out of my I have 5 sisters, I was the only one who was against interracial marriages. And then I wound up being the person to marry a white man. And so
I like that.
What I get to see, and he's 100% in, he works with high-end clients. He's a financial advisor. He owns his own company. So he's in a completely different world that I live in. I do social justice work. I do civil rights work. We're totally different worlds. And so the way we see the world is completely different lenses, but I think it's a reflection of what the world sees, right? And so we get to have interesting conversations. Some of them not always great and fun, very uncomfortable.
No, but it's given you a really unique perspective on the world. Absolutely. It really has.
A very unique perspective. And so does he recognize that bias exists? Yes. Does he recognize privilege? Absolutely. Does he recognize when people are not being absolutely. Anti-racist? Absolutely. He sees all of that. And the great thing is though he's had 20 years of experience with me. I mean, we've been married for a long time to know that. So, but there's a lot of work to be done. And again, making certain that we hold people accountable, that our police, that there's oversight, that the funding that we're looking at for police officers, that we find other ways that we can shift some of that funding to social programs to help people, looking at the different protocols that are taken. Yes, all of that is up for review.
I wanted to have you on here to talk about George Floyd. I know you've got a lot of thoughts about this, and it goes back to the Rayshard Brooks case in the sense of, I've been looking through this, and this is another one. I am deeply concerned about how this outcome is going to play out. There's conflicting autopsy reports. There's a lot of chatter of he did everything he was supposed to do. Such things as George really wasn't choking like we all can clearly see he was. He may have had some heart issues because of what was going on and maybe some drugs in his system. Are you concerned at all that these guys might walk, and what might happen after this? All the things that you mentioned have no relevance, in my opinion, as to what was done to George Floyd. George Floyd was murdered. His life was taken. I mean, we cannot deny that. So if he is not, I do not, in this particular instance, when I look at that police officer, my heart is angry. And I had to really work on my composure. I was sad, I was angry, I was frustrated, I was overwhelmed, and I had to shift that to, because I love the Lord, I want to have Him abide in me, to work on my heart. Any reasonable person would know that that police officer did the most heinous thing. And when someone say that was like, that was a death penalty on the streets. He just instituted the death penalty. There was too much time. 8 minutes, 46 seconds for us to just sit there and watch that. I do not care what the autopsy report says. I don't care what his previous conditions were, of course, that's what the council is going to bring up. But any reasonable person looking at that would definitely say that was not necessary. So if he does, you mean like be let go? Is that what you're asking me? I think
God, if he does, we will have a war on our hands.
You believe that?
Are you not seeing what's going on in the streets right now?
I'm just I'm asking you.
So let me just tell you this and just give you a little history lesson. In 1968, when Martin Luther King was killed, Martin Luther King had spent so much time with the Poor People's Campaign to try and put into place a lot of things that we're trying to do and other advocates are trying to do with police reform. And he had spent a lot of time talking to Lyndon Johnson, our president, about these changes. When Martin Luther King was killed in 1968, it was in April of 1968, there were riots that happened across these United States. And when Lyndon Johnson was in Air Force One, he looked down and he said, "Oh my gosh, this looks like Vietnam War." You want to know? The same thing is going to happen if that happens with these police officers. So you better get ready, because what happened 7 days after Martin Luther King was killed? Do you know what law that was put in place that Martin Luther King had worked so hard on? Was called the Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act basically said that you cannot discriminate on the basis of race, color, gender, national origin, sex in the area of housing. We had a lot of people who were against it. but he knew he had to put that in place in order to give African Americans an understanding that their voices are being heard. So if that happens, I guarantee you we will be in a different country, just like we were in 1968. We're only getting a little kind of appetizer of what's going on. And we've seen some things go a little awry, but that's my opinion.
I hope you're right. I absolutely hope you're right that the officers are convicted and charged with what they should be charged. But I think there's going to be an attorney or a group of attorneys that are going to look at this. They're going to look at the police protocol, and they're going to be able to make a case that, hey, man, the officer was just doing what is taught to do, and you can't convict this guy. I worry about it.
I don't know if you saw 60 Minutes when the Minneapolis police director, or he's the the head person, police chief. Couldn't think of what his name is.
It's okay.
What the title is, police chief, was on there saying that was not correct. He's, yes, there is. They did allow those, that procedure, but the way in which it was done was not correct. Yeah. So he even agreed with that. So, I think that those are the kinds of things where you have to look at that. And so I believe that he should receive the highest conviction.
Yeah. No, and I think Diana, he's also going up, the police chief that you're talking about is going up against the police union. And I would say this to anyone, good luck with that, because they're not going to budge on this.
Police unions, some unions, I come from both my parents are blue collar union family. My mom was a union steward. We know that unions can protect bad behavior. And so there's unions everywhere, but we have to recognize what's right is right. And until we're willing to recognize that and listen to the voice of the people and come up with a way that people are treated as humans, not as dogs or less than the population, that's not the right of the police officers to, use that type of authority on the streets. Well, that's why we have a legal system that we have these people go through. So there we go.
Any thoughts on statues? You want to chat about statues? You want to?
No.
No? Don't you want to talk about them?
Statutes?
Statues, Confederate statues.
I thought you meant legal statues.
All right, let me start.
Are we talking about what Ohio Revised Code or?
No, let me start over. Do you want to talk about statues, Confederate statues? Any thoughts about them?
Yeah, get rid of them.
Just tear them down.
God, yeah. You know what it's like for me I go in a community, if I see a Confederate flag, do you know the first thing I'm going to do? Oh, thanks for letting me know. Okay.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, when I was a diversity director at this company, I'll leave nameless, and they had the room set up for each different type of president, and it looked like a plantation. And I'm in the room, and it was the Jefferson room, and there was a plantation picture. This is history, yes. I just don't want to be sitting there looking at that. I feel like, are we having, statutes for the Holocaust people? It's just that kind of stuff. To me, just does not set well with me. So, I just think that these are the kinds of things when we're talking about looking at a country holistically and realizing the pain and the amount of pain that has been in our country, we're going to be looking at a lot of things differently. Yeah. Like, if we're really going to look at this differently, we have to look at these things differently. Can you see me? Something's happening. Oh, sorry. So those are the things that we have to look at.
Well, I guess I think it was so bizarre. Out at one of the races, they were still having the flag up there, and I don't know why they just didn't come around and just make everybody that had a Confederate flag up just tear it down. I think the Racing Commission, I'm sorry who it is, should have just made those people tear it down after they put that mandate down that you weren't supposed to display. I don't get that. Just go up to the people and say, you take that down or we're taking it down right now. So I don't get that. But, I guess the question everybody asks about the statues is like, where does it stop? Do you stop it with with George Washington on the bill? Do you rip those up? Do we get somebody different?
We're
George,
at dollar bills now.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was a slave owner. He liked slaves, just like Thomas Jefferson. They all liked slaves. They did all their dirty work. They loved it.
Well, I think what we're doing, a lot of people are looking at a lot of the statutes of people who were advocates for hate. Okay, so I can't get into George Washington and to those types of folks at this particular juncture. I think that folks are looking at this as symbols of hatred in this country. So that's another avenue that I haven't even begun to explore, because right now, Randy, I'm just trying to take it step by step. There's a lot going on in our world today, and I just feel like those. What people are feeling is they're just really tired of seeing symbols of hate. Yeah. Yeah. And as if that's a normal thing, especially like, we want to talk about something of the Indy 500. Folks, well, I don't understand why we don't get a lot of people that are minorities here or black people. Well, you guys need the Confederate flag. And honestly, people didn't even understand that.
No, take your Confederate flag down and you might get a bigger attendance of African Americans.
But see, Randy, these are the kind of cultural competencies that a lot of people lack. And you look at them and you're like, really, you don't know that? They didn't know that? Really, you don't know that? Those are the kinds of... Yeah.
I'm sorry. I hope I didn't interrupt you. Diana, I had an interesting guest on here with a good thought about these statues, and see what you think about this. His idea was leave the statues alone, but change the descriptions of what that person was really about, how they were fighting this country, how they were against this country, how they were against stopping slavery, and leave it up there so people get the truth of what that person was really about.
Well, why don't you create a hate museum and put all those statues in the hate museum, and then you can talk about that. These are the people that were against our country. Put them in a little room, and you can look at them there. I just don't want them in the middle of our country square, because they are not a representation of these United States for the people, for liberation, for love, and for the harmony that's supposed to be by the many people who are in this country. Right. I just think that that's what you have to look at. So.
I'm just scared that the hate museum might do very, very well. It might become very profitable. I think there might be enough attendance there to keep it going.
Yeah, there's a symbol for that. Then I mean, that's a sad way of looking at it. But unfortunately, yeah.
All right. Well, Diana, you are a wonderful guest. What's the name of the book, by the way?
Yeah, my book is called Inspiration in My Shoes, and it shares the memoir of my life. Basically, I wrote it as a means to, talk to young women about ways that they can be resilient, to rise above adversity, racism, those kinds of things, and be the individuals, the advocates, to be a bright light in their community. So it talks about how I've overcome a lot of things and still, making an impact in the world.
Diana, thank you so much.
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate your time.
We're out of here.
All right. Take care.
No more Roach on Florida TV.